Call the Ascension Parish Council meeting of December 15, 2005 to order. Mr. McConnell, would you please lead us in prayer?
Be glad to, Mr. Chairman. Our Father in heaven, at this time of the year, this time of peace, we ask that you bestow peace upon us. You preserve the peace that you've given us, and help us to find the peace within ourselves, within our hearts, that we can convey that peace to each other. Because that's what you were all about, and that is what we should be all about as well. Please look over our hearts and over our minds and over our shoulders and give us the wisdom and the guidance that we need to bring peace to your people, to bring peace to this parish, to bring peace to this parish government, this council, and this administration. As always, we ask you to protect our brothers and sisters in uniform, whether they be in faraway lands or right here at home. If they're working in uniform to protect us, Father, please protect them, bring them home to their families safe and soon. And by the way, happy birthday. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Ms. Suzanne, let the record reflect Councilman Thomas is absent. Chair's addition, there's no 2/3 tonight. Discuss public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on any of the agenda items, please sign in with the secretary. Number 5, the consent agenda, the regular council meeting of November 17th. Do I hear a motion to accept? Motion by Mr. Shakespeare, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passed. Number 6, Parish President report. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the council and people in our parish. On behalf of parish government and administration, we want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. It'll be our last regular council meeting of the year. And to the citizens of our parish, we give out that same wish. And it's been an interesting year in our state, and so I guess a lot of us are looking forward to a new year and hopefully one with less hurricane activity. My report's going to be relatively brief tonight. Before we get to Mr. Mike Paterno with URS, I just want to say a couple things, a brief report on my trip. I'm sorry that didn't work out and Martin can go with me, but some work problems and Jerry. But it was a very productive trip to Washington with several hours spent with our congressional delegation, as well as Representative Jindal, who is not part of our delegation, but who is very committed to helping us, working with us. And you've gotten a packet from me this evening. I just left my office and sent you a packet of material where you'll see in there that a little over $5 million is earmarked right now for our parish through the FEMA Hazardous Mitigation Program, which is part of just the first phase of $250 million coming to Louisiana. There's even talk in Washington that this could go as high as $4 billion, with obviously most of that money going to the areas really devastated by the storm. But a lot of this money would be made available for levees and pumping systems and so forth in areas that are prone to flooding. And so that 5.2, I think it is up to right now, that first $250 million coming to Ascension is something that you'll see that some of the details on it when you get home tonight and tomorrow as you look at your email. In addition, the 40% of the $8 million earmarked for Highway 42/73 will be made available to us in early spring. And the reason it'll be 40% is that it's a 5-year bill this year. And since that bill was effective October of '04, this is actually the second year of the transportation bill. So you get 20% a year normally. So we'll get 40% of that $8 million coming to us. And we're already working with the Department of Transportation Development and the district offices on those projects with our public works people. In addition, the $250,000 that Senator Vitter has secured for Lamar Dixon has now passed the conference committee. It's just waiting for the president's signature. So that looks like a done deal. And there's a lot of work going on now currently to try to finish up so they can get home for Christmas. And there will be other monies in there for us in various bills, it looks like, in various places. Sometimes it may show up in strange places based on the topic, but that's the way they do things sometime in Washington. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll come out real well. I think that was my 8th trip personally there, and I think for the first time with 1 or 2 people on the staff, so we personally connected to the point that there was a relationship of trust. And it was very productive for a couple of days there. The other thing that we have for you tonight is URS. Right, I guess before the storm sometime, they had finished their analysis of public works, looking at what we could do organizationally and structurally to improve. What improving opportunities did we have? And we're doing this in each department to try to determine how we can give our citizens a better product and a better service. And so Mike and Tom are here tonight to review with you this packet that you have on that analysis.
Thank you. Mike Paterno with URS, and of course I have here with me Mr. Tom Dawson. As Ronnie said, as part of our task order contract, we were tasked with review of the Department of Public Works. I'm just going to be, I know we have a long agenda tonight, so I'll try and just be brief and touch on the highlights and invite everybody to review the report in detail, and certainly will be available for any questions or issues you want to discuss. Several of the critical service areas that were considered, if you turn to page 1.1, were the integrated engineering services to plan, design, construct, and manage the capital improvements projects. Coordinated quality control efforts related to these design reviews, inspections, and code enforcement. Prioritization and completion of work orders in a timely manner to force the community acceptance while providing high-quality service. Workforce development, retention of employees, ensure diverse and inclusive organization. And development of a business plan and policies and procedures manual to meet new challenges and long-range needs to the parish to effectively serve and support the public. One of the key pieces of information that was in here, of course, was with DPW staff interviews. And then we organized the report. You can see on page 1.3 towards the bottom there. Section for overall service to the community, DPW organization, information technology, infrastructure database recommendations, project implementation recommendations, workforce development, the DPW organization and staffing requirements, and then additional recommendations to improve efficiency with a summary towards the end. The interview form, by the way, is in the back in the appendices if you want to look to see for details, as well as organizational charts and some recommended organizational charts. And I want everybody to keep in mind that this is basically just the start. This is opening the door to improving DPW. There are a lot of things they do right, but certainly there's room for improvement. They have begun to implement a lot of the things that were in this report. In addition to that, just kind of touching on some of the highlights for the sections. In Section 2, overall service to the community, I won't go through all the details, but as you can see on page 2.2-1, just the breadth of all the things, and I know that everybody's aware that the DPW takes care of on a daily basis. In addition to that, on the following page, you can see some of the things that they're not required and do not provide right now, but in the very near future will be, such as some of the water and sewer services to the other areas in there. With that, I would also note the very positive aspects of DPW operations. Some of the positive aspects of the department were identified during the staff interviews. These optimistic virtues consisted of dedicated, hardworking staff, pleased with their current positions and level management, and adequate resources such as computer equipment, other key points and things noted in the interviews, and we summarized those in a list below on page 2-4. There were some areas where we had some redundancy in services that they've gone back and tried to eliminate that overlap, such as some of the work that Department of Recreations and DPW were doing also. We've also listed those in the report. The DPW organization, of course, was broken down in both the capital projects and infrastructure division, as shown on page 3-1, and of course the operation and maintenance division, which included roads and bridges, major drainage division, maintenance yard and division, utilities, DPW Donaldsonville, and then Conflicts Resolution Officer. With that, I'll just kind of basically close, just running through quickly. If everybody will turn to page 9-1, you can go through just quickly the summary recommendations. As we noted, the report is broken down to different categories, as for instance, the information technology and infrastructure databases. Some of the key issues were coordination and planning of work orders, recommendation to implement the full range of functional applications with the CartGraph software, maintenance of equipment and fleet, website update and improving customer relations, and establishing the database with the CartGraph software. They're in the process of doing that. They have an employee dedicated full-time to getting that up to speed. Canals and waterways, initiate canal classification program. Updating the master drainage plan and traffic counts program, which they've started. They, on a regular basis now, are taking these traffic counts. Computer design software and updating it to the latest AutoCAD so that they can accept as-built from the consulting engineers and keep files up to date. Documents and filing for a central locations for the files seem to be an area also. And of course, building facilities and conducting inventory of all of the buildings. That goes on throughout the recommendations for each one of the categories, including the project implementation and design issues, workforce development, and of course the DPW organization and staffing, and then of course some additional recommendations on other issues that we found. So again, I invite everybody to read the report in detail. We'll be available for any comments or questions or issues you want to discuss in depth. And with that, we'll go ahead and take any questions you have now. If not, please advise us of any questions you have in the future. Thank you.
Mr. McConnell.
Just briefly, Mr. Paterno, thank you, and this looked pretty in-depth, but, and this is just a clerical thing. My particular copy is missing half of section 2-6, all of sections 2-7, 2-8, 2-9.
Okay, well, we'll make sure of that. They make copies first thing this morning, trying to rush it out there, so we'll take care of that.
My colleagues on either side of me are missing the same
Okay.
page, so if you could, just
We
make sure we get
will.
all those.
We'll reissue. Apologize for that.
Anyone else has any further questions for Mr. Mike? No. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dempsey.
Announce to see if Quentin LeBlanc's in the audience.
There's a Mr. Quentin LeBlanc in the audience.
Thank you.
Now, before we go any further, there's one thing we're going to do on agenda item number 10. We're going to pass on it. It's a duplication. We're going to take that up on agenda number 23. So number 10 will be passed on. Number 7, Acadian Ambulance, letter of formal notification to extend the existing agreement for service to the Ascension Parish Jail from January 1, 06 through December 31st, 06. Mr.
I'm
Roy
going to
Katz.
adopt the agreement, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. McConnell, second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Is there any question? Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes. That was easy for you, Roy.
Good job, Roy. Excellent report.
Number 8, acceptance of bids, Mr. Bonnie Burrell, for oil and lubricants.
Let's do that again. On December 6th, we received bids for oil and lubricants for 2006. The purchasing department recommends accepting the bid from Roland J. Robert.
Motion.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Mr. Shake Snyder, to accept the lowest bid recommended by purchasing. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passed.
Thank you.
Number 9, joint agreement, Ascension Parish Civic Center Commission. Legal, Mr. Babbitt. And you do have a revised copy that is outside of your packet that was on the side. Make sure you get the revised.
The only revision to that agreement is that we specifically put in the agreement that as a servitude or right of access on the 2 driveways to Airline Highway. There's 2 things here. One of them is a new lease agreement with the Ascension Parish School Board. This is the Civic Center, which is located on the 16th School Board section, Civic Center in Sorrento. The lease agreement has a primary term of 5 years with 2 5-year renewals. The only lease consideration amount is that we're going to maintain the property. That is, pay all the expenses, pay all the maintenance. The second document is a cleanup measure, which I explained to you at, I don't know if it's finance, one of your other meetings, was a motion to dissolve and abolish the Ascension Parish Civic Center Commission, which was formed many years ago by this council. And that particular commission has been inactive and there was a commission between the school board, the cities, and the parish. That committee has been inactive and has had no role, so all we're doing is formalizing what's actually been done anyway, and that is the whole thing's been operated by the parish. This will require an ordinance. The school board attorney wanted this resolution before we entered into this lease agreement, so we did this ahead of schedule. If you approve this, I've got a lease drawn up. I'll give to Suzanne to put on your next agenda to do an ordinance to dissolve the commission. It was done by ordinance. It's got to be dissolved by ordinance. So these are two actions before you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Like I said, it's a 5-year lease, 2 5-year renewal options.
Chairman. So Rick,
Mr. Hillenbeck.
so what you're saying is you want a resolution authorizing or a resolution in support of the agreement and lease?
There's a resolution attached to the lease,
Right.
approving the lease agreement with the school board, and there's a resolution to dissolve the commission, and part of that was we wanted to get rid of and clean up these conflicting leases. There was about 3 different leases surrounding the property. One was for 40 acres, one was for the BMX bike track area, and one was for the Civic Center. So our intention is to clean up all those old leases and have one lease of one piece of property, which is the Civic Center and the parking area for the Civic Center itself.
Motion for resolution, support resolution.
Motion by Mr. Hillenbeck. Is there a second?
I second for discussion.
Second by Mr. Shakespeare. Discussion. Mr. Shakespeare.
Well, we had talked about it at the last meeting, and I have no definite objection to any of this, except that it just didn't go to committee on this, which were where we said to send it, and we hadn't had a meeting yet. So I just wanted to see what procedure you wanted to follow. We didn't get a chance to go through it line by line with any of the committee members and know really what the feeling was. So I thought we were going to be doing that.
I'll withdraw my motion and we'll assign this to committee.
All right. Motion been rescinded by Mr. Hillenbeck and to send it to committee. Mr. Byron.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Batman, if you could possibly make this meeting,
Yes.
Which one is it and where is it?
see a strategic plan, when's the next meeting?
Well, we had one set up for the 19th, which is Monday, and we canceled it because we didn't have, this was on this agenda, and we didn't have it on the agenda. And so we could settle a special meeting, and we might be able to pick it back on the Tuesday meeting that we have.
Mr. Shakespeare, why don't you look at the calendar and
I
see
will
what
check.
your most available date to get it done, and if it means call a special meeting to get it done. so that
It
we
looks
can have
like right now the second week in January.
Second week of January?
Yes.
Will you have, when
I'll
you make
get
a
with
decision, let me know.
I'll get it.
Okay. So motion rescinded, no motion, that's it, it's going to committee. All right, any further discussion on it?
Chairman Salwan.
Mr. Valentine.
On that particular item, would I ask administration to supply expenses, what we use it for, if the ball fields are still used? I know the BMX, the racetrack is not, but exactly what we use it for, and how much it costs us a year to run it.
All right. All right, number 11, Finance Committee report. Mr. McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We looked at several contracts at the last Finance Committee meeting. Item number 11A is a contract with Whitney National Bank to renew the fiscal agency agreement. It was the unanimous recommendation of the committee to do so.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Shakespeare. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
And item number 11B was it was a contract to project the agreement with the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism for the Office of State Parks for the Highway 621 park. And it's an amendment to a contract so that we can go out and seek grant money for the operation of this park, and it was also the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee.
Move the recommendation,
Second.
Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Is there any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, item 11C is a little complex, and I'd ask for the assistance of my number one legal counsel to help carry us through this, just in case there are any concerns. But item 11C1 was a resolution amending section 9.03 Ascension Parish Sales and Use Tax District Number 1 ordinance. Mr. Babb.
This is a cleanup measure. There is a penalty for late payment of sales taxes in our Code of Ordinances. And it provides for, it refers to a Louisiana revised statute number, and that has been decided can fluctuate. In order, there's a Supreme Court case that says we can fix that penalty, and we can fix that penalty to a degree certain. And this is a cleanup measure that was recommended to you by the Sales and Use Tax Authority, asking you to clean this up and to allow the fixed rate that we're currently charging to be in effect and not use the statutory fluctuating rate. The rate is 15% per year. The reason there are so many resolutions and introductions of ordinances, it all does the same thing. We have three sales tax districts. We have the consolidated gravity drainage, 1 and number 2. So we're doing 3 resolutions and 3 ordinances to amend those sections of our code. So although it's 3 different sections, 3 resolutions, 3 ordinances, it does the same thing. It just does it in all 3 sales tax districts. And state law wants resolution. Our charter says by ordinance, so we're doing both. So that's why there's 6 things in front of you to do one simple thing, and that is to fix the penalty rate in our Code of Ordinances for those that don't pay, don't remit on time. It fixes that penalty rate. So that's what all those do.
And even though it's very tedious, thank you, Mr. Babin, it's very tedious, Mr. Chairman, after great discussion, it was a recommendation of the Finance Committee that we offer these resolutions and then turn around and offer them as introductions to the ordinance so that we can start anew in the new sales tax year. So it was a unanimous recommendation to adopt the first resolution amending section 9.03 of Sales Tax Use District Number 1 ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Shakespeare. Is there any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item C2 is to take that same resolution for Sales Tax District Number 1 and introduce it as an ordinance, and that was our recommendation.
Motion to introduce, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Ms. Fontenot, second by Mr. Byringer. Is there any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item C3 was identical, except that it applied to Sales and Use Tax District Number 2.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Hillensbeck. Is there any question? Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item number 4 is the introduction of that ordinance.
Move to introduce, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Is there any question on this one? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
And getting close to the end, item number 5 is the resolution for the East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District Number 1 Sales and Use Tax Ordinance.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Ms. Fontenot. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
And item number 6 is the introduction of the ordinance for the drainage tax.
Move to introduce, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Mr. Byringer. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item number 11D, after a lengthy discussion about the funding for the coroner's office, it was unanimously agreed to adopt an increase to the budget of $58,645 appropriation for the coroner's office.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Hillensbeck, second by Mr. Shakespeare. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item 11E is also a resolution, and this is something to help the residents of this parish to lower their flood insurance ratings, and also to assist the parish in going out for grant money for flooding. And it is a resolution to adopt the parish-wide hazard mitigation program plan as presented by the Aegis Corporation, and the committee did unanimously recommend that.
Motion by Mr. Shakespeare.
Second.
Second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item 11F is an annual housekeeping item, and it's a contract renewals through our mental health department and program. The renewals for Dr. J. Robert Barnes and Dr. Donald A. Scheck-Snyder, and it was the unanimous recommendation of the committee to renew those contracts.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Todd Lambert, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
The final item, Mr. Chairman, of our committee meeting, item G, this is a contract between Mary C. McNeil, a licensed clinical social worker, and the parish of Ascension, and this is to provide substance abuse education, and it is completely funded by a grant, and it was a unanimous recommendation of the committee that this be adopted.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Todd Lambert,
And I'll second it.
second by Mr. Shakespeare. Is there any discussion? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
And that's our report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Number 12, Strategic Planning Committee.
We did not have a meeting, Mr. Chairman.
No meeting, all right. Number 13, Recreation Committee.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Number 14, Personnel Committee, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Chairman Savoy. The Personnel Committee met and had some interviews last week, but we also have to appoint tonight the members of the Waterway Commission, which this council had passed an ordinance creating the Waterways Commission. The appointments tonight, there is one question, Mr. Babin. One of the problems that came up in our committee meeting was that the alternates did not have time limits. The board, the members that served on the committee do have time limits based in the ordinance, but the alternates do not. So that may be a housekeeping item we may need to clean up, just for a note. With that, the first member to the Waterways Commission for a term of 2 years from January 1 till 206 to 12/31/208 would be Mr. Ben Babin.
I move, Mr. Chairman, to appoint Mr. Ben Babin.
Motion by Mr. McConnell, second by Mr. Dempsey Lambert. Is there any opposition?
Correct, question.
Mr. Hillensbeck.
Yes.
You said 12/31, it says 12/15 on.
I'm sorry.
On it.
I'm looking at the
What's-
new one right
Yeah,
here.
well, okay.
No, we didn't right there. We actually made an error of trying to calculate the dates are wrong on the agenda.
Okay.
And they actually will begin serving their term January 1st.
First.
As the ordinance.
That's what I'm reading right here.
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay.
I apologize.
Thank
So,
you.
so I didn't make an error.
No.
I did?
No.
Okay,
No.
thank you. All right, we'll move on now to second member will be a 2-year term with the same dates, and that will be Mr. Dalton Carpenter.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Shea-Snyder. Any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passed.
Third member will be Mr. Ronald Bro for a 2-year term.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Shea-Snyder. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Fourth member will be, for a 1-year term, will be Mr. Sammy Babin.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Thompson. Any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Mr. John Tomplay will be appointed, or recommendation to be appointed for 1 year also.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Ms. Fontenot. Any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion
Now,
passes.
those are the 5 committee members. We'll have 2 alternates. First alternate number 1 will be Mr. Alvin Ruiz.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Byringer, second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
And alternate number 2 will be recommendation will be Mr. Curtis Sutherland.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Mr. Thompson. Any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
I know we appreciate certainly these gentlemen with all the hard work that they did. I know Dempsey worked with these guys a good bit, and I'm sure Mr. Hillensbeck did also with Byron Manshak and Ament River. And of course, they also will oversee Conway and all the major tributaries also. We're dealing with that. So we appreciate those guys and congratulations. Hope you fellows do a great job. We also...
Mr. Valentine, before you go any further, all the newly elected members here that would like to take a picture, Mr. Dempsey Lambert, the ones that worked on this thing, past president, you want to get a picture, Charles? Want y'all come on up. Everyone that was just appointed, come on up, get a picture.
Yeah, you go get it.
You got a clean copy? Thank you. Yeah, well, I see 3-1 right here. Yeah, we're in good shape. Thank you. That's what I wanted.
All right, Mr. Valentine, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also have a couple of spots. One is a renewing term of Mr. Nathaniel Stevens on the Ascension Parish Fire Protection District Number 1 Board.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Mr. Shea Snyder. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having any? Motion passes. Speak up.
Also on the Ascension Parish Fire Protection District Number 1, we have a gentleman by the name of Mr. James LeBlanc that we're recommending to replace Chris Gonzalez.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Byringer. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
The Personnel Committee also interviewed for the council selection for our spot on the Parish Economic Development Board, replacing Mr. Aubrey Hinkle, who, of course, everybody knows Mr. Hinkle did an outstanding job the short time, but unfortunately his job moved him to Texas and he had to resign, but we had a lot of compliments about how good he was, and we certainly appreciate his short time. We think we also have another person here that will fill those shoes. This gentleman's name is Mr. Buddy Broussard, and we recommend.
Motion by Mr. Shea Snyder, second by Mr. McConnell. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passed.
On the agenda, you have the appointment for planning and zoning. We're going to pass over that tonight. We are getting an ethics opinion dealing with Mr. Julio, who has gave notice to the Personnel Committee, and we need to get that in writing before we act on that. We will move to appointment for the Appeals, Adjustments and Appeals Board. We recommend Kathy DeSater replacing Miss Julie Bluey.
Motion by Mr. Shea Snyder.
Motion.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Number 15, Transportation Committee. Ms. Fontenot.
Thank you, Mr. Savoy. Mr. Rue?
Ain't good?
Mr. Rue? Mr. Rue has a few recommendations to bring for us tonight. Thank you.
Transportation Committee met the other night, Tuesday night, and have the following recommendations. First is the Irma Boulevard Bridge DOTD non-participating items invoice.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shea Snyder, second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Second item, item B, a certificate of substantial completion, Boudreaux Road Phase 1, acceptance.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Ms. Fontenot. Is there any question? That's the Christmas present. I mean,
Congratulations, Mr. Thompson.
congratulations. Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item C, bid approval, clearing and grubbing for Boudreaux Road Phase 2, D-Pen.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Byrader. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item D, acceptance of roads into the parish maintenance system. The list is presented in your packet.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Todd Lambert, second by Ms. Fontenot. Is there any question? Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Item E is a renewal of task order contracts. If you remember, this came, we do this on an annual basis instead of coming back to you at individual times throughout the year. The ones recommended by the committee are as follows. Number for geotechnical services, professional services industries, and also soil testing engineers.
Motion.
You want to do them all? No, let's do them all. If anybody, go ahead and go
That's
through
fine.
the list, and if anybody has any, want to discuss anyone, we'll pull that one out and take it up individually.
Yes, sir. Item 2 is engineering, GSA Incorporated, it's supposed to be PEC Engineers, and Burt Klein Peter Engineers.
So moved.
Item 3, construction material testing services, citywide testing and inspections, Delta Testing and Inspection, and Louisiana Testing Incorporated. Item 4, right-of-way title research services, Ascension Title Services Incorporated. They passed on item 5. They're going to reconsider this at the next Transportation Committee meeting. Number 6, right-of-way appraisal services, River Parish Appraisers. Surveyors, SJB Group, BFM Corporation, and Fort Tablada.
All right, is there any one item that we want to pull out and discuss individually? If not, Mr. Thompson.
Why are we passing number 5?
Ms. Morris has went to another law firm, so she's no longer by herself. She's asking to be considered for that, but as part of her new law firm. The committee wants to review the request and take it up at the next meeting.
That's all you have, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Shakespeare.
We didn't have any real opposition to it. They just, she didn't get her paperwork in yet to change the law firm, the names or anything like that. So, I want to just clear that.
All right. Any further? What's the pleasure?
So moved.
Motion.
You can have it. There you go.
Motion by
Mine was still floating over there, Mr. Chairman.
You wasn't wrong, Mr. McConnell. Bill just wasn't reading fast enough. Motion by Mr. Todd Lambert, second by Mr. McConnell. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
When you don't pay attention. Thank you, Mr. Rue. I just wanted to say that the Transportation Committee did discuss under old business the impact fee. We were not ready to move on it, that it was recommended that we would try to do another meeting Tuesday night. I could not get it, this room has been booked. And so I'm gonna either try to work with the committee and get it scheduled for the week after Christmas, if that's okay with everybody. And so as soon as I can get that information, it'll probably be known by administration. Anyone wanting to try to attend that meeting can contact Ms. Suzanne or Ms. Gale at administration. They'll be able to tell you if the meeting is set. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fontenot. Number 16, Utilities Committee, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, we had a meeting, and there's a couple of things that we need to report on, but we put them on the agenda for the first meeting in January.
That's all you have. Thank you. All right, number 17, zoning review ID 136505, property located on the west side of Louisiana Highway 431, approximately 850 feet south of Louisiana Highway 931, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to crossroads commercial for Mr. Giles Williams. And this is to accept or deny. Mr. Lance Brock.
Yes, sir. The recommendation from the zoning commission was to deny this request.
Can you tell us, based on what?
Based on the corner of that lot, it was, at this time, it's 660 feet at that intersection. He was asking to extend it down. Their feelings were is that that intersection needs to grow first before you go out, and that corner needs to be developed first before it comes down, and that hasn't happened yet.
All right, what's the pleasure of the council?
Move to accept the recommendation.
Motion by Mr. Shakes now to accept the recommendation of the planning committee.
Second.
Second by Ms. Fontenot. Is there any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passed. Number 18, zoning review ID 125105. Property located on the north side of Highway 42, approximately 690 feet west of Idle Owl Road, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from conservation to mixed use, tract A1B of the Joseph Less subdivision for John Tompley. Mr. Lance Brock.
That recommendation was to deny the request based on a spot zoning.
Chairman, motion to deny planning and zoning's recommendation.
Second. Got a motion by Mr. Byrigger to deny the planning commission's recommendation, second by Mr. Dempsey Lambert. Is there any question to the motion? Mr. Valentine.
Mr. Brock, staff is recommending denying, and so did the planning and zoning commission recommending denying.
Yes, sir.
Is there something here I'm missing, Mr. Barrett?
Sir?
Is there something here I'm missing, we denying this? Typically, we do not, without explanation.
No, sir.
I can't vote unless I understand if there's some information that we need to know, this council needs to know, that was not privy to the planning and zoning why they made their ruling, or if Mr. Brock or anybody else wants to share some light on why we should do what I consider a spot zoning, which is, this council has talked about not doing spot zoning. I'm just asking a question. I want to be able to vote on this right.
Yeah.
I don't want to set a precedent.
Mr. Shakespeare.
After looking at the project, and I was on planning and zoning before, when you go to the river situation, it's a very unique situation, in that people doing boat projects and such are going to be located on areas where it's conducive for river traffic and at the river. Looking at this, the first site was around the bridge where all of the boat dock facilities are. The next one looks like, if you look at it strictly from a river standpoint, would be this one, which he was participating in similar activities before we rezoned and blanketed that whole area with conservation. And I understand why the recommendation was for conservation, because that area was along the river. But you would not get the standard development from one corner out commercial to the, across because of the river, the special river. So in my opinion, that I think this is a special situation, and the spot zoning wouldn't apply as it normally would with a normal road, that you're having a different situation here. And that's the reason that I would tend to agree with the rezoning of this area, because the use is basically for that already, and it seems to fit that area. And that's why I was just.
Any further questions, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Dempsey Lambert.
Yeah, I would like to echo some of the same things that Councilman Shakespeare was mentioning, but I have Mr. Tompley here tonight and a few of the residents that live beside him, and these $200,000 and $300,000 boats that they pull in and launch at this site, it brings a lot of tax revenue and different things to the parish. That's why I'm in support of it. some of these issues, I mean, you just have to take and go look at it. Appreciate everyone going out to the site and looking at it. So, that's why I'm in support of it.
Mr. Hillenbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned local residents that live close by in support of it. Would any of them like to come forward?
Can't do that.
Any of them sign up? Mr. Tomplay, if you want to speak on this issue, this is your property.
We can ask them to come.
He didn't sign up.
If we ask them.
Mr. Tomplay? Yes, sir. I'm going to yield you time to speak briefly. I offered the public to sign up at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
I recognize it is your property, but it is out of order. I will yield you a little bit of time for a few words.
All right. I ask that y'all rezone it back to mixed use to where we can continue growing in the same direction we had. We have no plans for changing what we're doing. We're going to continue with boat storage and boat launching. Whenever the property was changed from what it was previously zoned to the conservation, it's caused us problem as far as getting financing on any further growth. We've already pulled the permits to continue building the storage sheds. That's all approved, but we can't do it without financing, and that's not available as long as it's zoned what it is. The neighbors that have come, just about everyone that lives around it, we have no one in opposition to this, no one. Try to be a good neighbor to everyone, and that's what they came for, to speak with. We didn't know where. I thought it was back at the back that you signed up for it. We must have missed something where we were supposed to sign up, but there's 4 or 5 of them that came to speak in favor of it. So I'm not going to keep you on any longer, but I would hope that y'all do zone it back to mixed use.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fontenot?
I just want to ask Lance, if I understood Mr. Shakespeare correctly, and I just understood Mr. Tomplay, they were already doing this type of activity before it was rezoned?
Yes, ma'am.
So shouldn't they kind of be like grandfathered in?
They are grandfather and they're non-conforming. So they are non-conforming. And the parish is not stopping him from doing what he wants to do.
And he's just trying to expand right now? And there's a problem with that?
There's a problem from what I can understand with the financing, that he can't get financed because of the way that the property is zoned. He can't bore money, I guess you could say, on it with it being zoned the way that
And
it is.
this is his livelihood, his business, or part of it?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, I would think so.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
If he's using the property.
Mr. Valentine?
Let me first of all say that Mr. Tomplay, we just appointed him to the Waterways Commission, and I certainly appreciate the situation he's in, and I certainly do not want to cause him financial distress if this particular piece of property needs to be commercial. As I understand it, he was not able to attend the planning and zoning. He does work shift work, and I do not think he spoke. Am I right, Mr. Monchon? He did not appear. And we did not have anybody that came in opposition of it. It kind of puts us between a rock and a hard place. Puts me, I know other members of the board may be comfortable, but I still see a slight problem with the situation. I understand what Mr. Shakespeare is saying, but unfortunately, I may have to vote against this on that particular situation.
I'm going to ask legal for information. Mr. Babin, as far as what you know on this particular issue here, listening to Mr. Shakespeare's explanation on why this is a special piece of property because it's being on the water, how do you feel defending the parish on this particular issue as far as spot zoning? Do you know enough about it to comment?
I don't know anything about it. The only thing I can tell you, spot zoning is not per se legal. Spot zoning raises the analysis to another threshold. There are cases you can spot zone. Spot zoning, so you can't say that spot zoning is per se illegal. You're generally steered away from it because the courts say if you're going to spot zone, then you're breaking away from a zoning plan, you're going to an individual property or type of analysis, which is against the concept of zoning. So it's not per se illegal. It just runs you to a heightened scrutiny. The standard is higher. The standard to show why the property should be zoned is higher. This particular case, I don't know the facts. I haven't reviewed. Did O'Neill give her opinion? I mean, it's not per se illegal. Can't sit here and say that.
Okay. All right. Is there any opposition to the motion?
I oppose.
One opposition, Mr. Valentine. Motion passes. Number 19, zoning review ID 126005. Property located on the west side of Louisiana Highway 73, Old Jefferson Highway, approximately 400 feet south of Louisiana Highway 427, Old Perkins Road, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to crossroads commercial, a 2.58 acre being the eastern portion of the H.O. Tugwell property for James H. Cox, Haley L. Cox, Roberta A. LaFleur. Mr. Lance Brock.
Yes, sir. The recommendation from the zoning commission was to deny this request based on the area the same as the first, being able to grow out from one way instead of going from the outside on in.
What's the pleasure?
Move to accept the recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shakes Knight, accept the recommendation, second by Ms. Fontenot. Is there any question? Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes. Ms. Suzanne, let the record reflect that Councilman Thomas entered. Number 20, zoning review ID 138505. Property located on the southwest corner of Louisiana Highway 427, Old Perkins Road, and Louisiana Highway 73, Old Jefferson Highway, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to crossroads commercial, tract B1 for Gail and Gerald Daigle. Mr. Brock.
The recommendation from the zoning commission was to deny this request. It is one lot from 19, and the reason was the same as 19.
Motion to deny, to accept the denial.
Motion by Ms. Fontenot to accept the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Committee. Second by Mr. Shakes Knight to accept their recommendation, which is denied.
Yes, sir.
Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes. Number 21, zoning review ID 138705, property located on the south side of Louisiana Highway 621, approximately 400 feet east of Louisiana Highway 73, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to mixed use, lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Forest Lawn subdivision for Jared Fisher, Lakeside Ascension LLC, and Vinnie Lakes LLC. Mr. Brock. Mr. Brock.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I have a speaker, but I'm going to let you speak, then I'll call.
The recommendation was to accept the request from the zoning commission.
Before we vote on this, I have someone from the audience would like to speak on this, Ms. Valerie Vargas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I have a moment to pass out some more information for the
Yes,
council
ma'am.
members? Thank you. And it's not going to go against my 3 minutes, is it? Taking that time.
I ain't messing with no pregnant woman.
You got your clock, didn't you, Dave?
what you're looking at right now is some subdivision restrictions for Forest Lawn subdivision, which were not in possession of the Zoning or Planning Commission at the time that this matter was voted on last month. In fact, Mr. King, Clint King, who was the individual who moved to accept, to grant the application for the rezoning, asked specifically whether or not there were any subdivision restrictions that governed restricting anything that was built on this particular property. And unfortunately, it was after I had already given a public comment and I could not get up again, and the applicant told the commission that there was no restrictions that were in force. Now, as you can see, these have the Ascension Parish Clerk of Court stamp on them. They were actually revised in 2002. They were amended. It was all filed with the Clerk of Court, so they are a matter of public record. I think because the Zoning and Planning Commission did not have these in their possession, that was one of the reasons that they allowed this rezoning measure to go forward. I had presented also a petition of 71 signatures from Lakes at Ascension LLC and Lakes at Ascension Crossing, both Lakes at Ascension and Lakes at Ascension Crossing, all of which basically felt that the rezoning would create a problem. I don't know if you all are familiar with this area of 621, but it is highly congested. There's a lot of traffic in this area, and the staff to the Zoning Commission actually recommended that it not be rezoned, specifically because it would change the residential character of this area. And I need to point out the reason, one of the other reasons that they did allow the rezoning measure to pass is because an area across the street is grandfathered in because it was done under the police jury as a commercial property. However, it has a house on it. Same thing on the corner opposite from this Forest Lawn area. This is one of the entrances to our neighborhood. And we're highly opposed to it being rezoned because you can't limit what's going to be on there. The applicant said that he was going to put an office building on that area, but you can put an office building on it right now as it's rezoned. There's absolutely no reason to rezone it because then you're opening it up to all kind of commercial activity. And we believe that that's a big problem for this area given the congestion that's already there. I know that you all are trying to be consistent in the zoning procedures and processes in the parish, and that's why you have a Planning and Zoning Commission. However, if those individuals do not have all the facts before them, and they're not given those facts when they're asked by the applicant, then it's an essential part of your duty to go ahead and deny this particular rezoning measure because those facts were not available. The applicant can always come back and reapply and provide those requested items. Not to mention this was at 11 o'clock at night, and everybody was really tired and had been waiting for hours and hours to speak. Most of the people who were with me who had opposed it had already gone home. You know, it's a Thursday night. Most of them have children. It's 11 o'clock. I mean, I was tired myself. But needless to say, I think that was another issue that came up, in addition to the fact that Mr. King was not given the information that he requested. And I can't help but point out in this case, the staff did recommend that they deny it. And, you know, the staff is in a position, looking at the consistency that you all want to maintain in the parish with the rezoning, they're in the best position to decide really what's going to happen and to make that recommendation. And even the staff didn't have these restrictions in place. So I would ask and implore you all, I do have residents with me tonight over here in the back who have come together to oppose this measure, to look at these restrictions, note that this area should not have been rezoned. And regardless of whether or not it has been grandfathered in the past, these areas across the street, that's not part of what you're trying to do now. And that should not be a consideration when this is considered to change the character of this residential district. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, motion to accept staff's recommendation.
Motion by Mr. Hill, second. Accept staff's recommendation.
No.
The Planning and Development Department, Mr. Chairman, has taken a position in opposition to the Planning and Zoning.
We've got a motion to accept the recommendations of the staff,
To deny.
which is to deny rezoning.
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Is there any questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shakespeare.
We have Mr. Marshall on the chairman of planning and zoning. I'd like to see, I'd like to know if this was presented as evidence at the meeting. I think so. Would it have made an effect on your decision?
I'm sure it would have factored in and would have made a difference in the decision of the commission.
Yeah, because this is pretty substantial. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes. Number 22, zoning review ID 138805, property located on the east side of Louisiana Highway 73, approximately 1,500 feet north of Louisiana Highway 621, to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to mixed use for Carl Courtney and Associates. Mr. Brock.
The recommendation was to deny the request based on a spot zoning.
What's the pleasure of the council?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Valentine, to accept the recommendation of the staff. It's second by Mr. Fontenot. Is there any questions? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Lance. Keep up the good work.
And the other.
I know it. Number 23, we've got an introduction of an ordinance. To consider an ordinance amending the personnel manual for the Ascension Parish government to add subsection 0 to section 3, authorizing the administration to award cost of living adjustments index to the consumer price index as necessary. Mr. Roy Katz.
We'd like to introduce this ordinance because we feel like we have, well, we know we have several employees in the neighborhood of 150 that are maxed out in their salary range. And if we don't have some kind of flexibility, these people will not be allowed to get anything according to the way the charter is written. So we were asking that we introduce the ordinance, which gives us some flexibility to give these people a cost of living increase along with the other employees.
Motion to move the ordinance.
Second.
Motion to introduce by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, second by Mr. McConnell. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Valentine.
Yes, at the last meeting, Roy, you know that we had discussed, and Chairman Savoy had suggested that we take this up in Personnel Committee, and we did not, or was not able to do that this past Tuesday, I guess, when we met. So we do want to take this up, gentlemen, but I did not want to delay it, but I do urge each councilman to read this ordinance, and we will discuss it at a personnel meeting that I will call, and we'll let you know when that date is, so that you can give any kind of information you'd like, or make sure that you read this correctly.
Any opposition? You got the motion?
Is it my understanding that this will be introduced?
This is introduction.
It
Yes,
is.
ma'am, it is.
I don't want to hold up it introduced.
He
You
will call it-
keep
he
it
will
on the
call
same
it-
pace.
Yes.
We'll take care of the
You will
personnel.
call Personnel Committee before the next meeting. Any opposition? Having none, motion passes. Number 24, public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the year 2006 budget to allocate a salary increase for the Justice of Peace and Constable. Mr. Batten.
Ordinance reads, be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Council of the State of Louisiana, the following amendments to the 2006 budget are hereby approved and appropriated. General Fund to allocate a salary increase for the Justices of the Peace and Constables in the amount of $500 per month, plus related benefits for a total allocation of $39,200, funded in by a transfer in from Sales and Use Tax District Number 1. Sales and Use Tax District Number 1, Fund, transfer out $39,200 to the General Fund for salary increase for the Justices of Peace and Constables in the amount of $500 per month, plus related benefits.
Move to open the public hearing.
Motion by Mr. McConnell to open the public hearing. Second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having the motion passes. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this public item?
Move to close, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Barriga, second by Ms. Fontenot to close the public hearing. Is there any opposition? Having none, motion passes.
Move ordinance, Mr. Chairman.
Number 25, the ordinance, moved by Mr. Hillensbeck, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any question? Any opposition? Having none, motion passes. Number 26.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Byrick, second by Mr. Todd Lambert, adjourned. Any opposition? Having none, motion passed. Happy holidays, everybody.